The sky over the ruined colony world was dark like iron. Black clouds rolled over broken towers and empty streets. The storm was heavy, and acid rain poured down with a hissing sound. Every drop burned whatever it touched. Metal beams melted into weak shapes, stone walls cracked and steamed. The ground turned into mud mixed with poison. No person dared to walk in such rain without cover, for skin would burn and clothes would tear apart. In the middle of this storm, a small sound rose between the clash of thunder and the hiss of acid. It was not the voice of a human, nor the call of a machine. It was the cry of something alive, something young and helpless. A dragon hatchling stood in the open street. Its wings were small, not yet strong to fly. Its scales were shining in patches of green and silver, but now many parts were black where the acid rain struck. The small creature curled its body, trying to hide its head under its wings, but the drops still reached it. The ground under its claws was smoking. Its body shook, and its weak cry was full of pain and fear. The ruined colony had long been silent, but one man still lived there. His name was Thomas. He was not a soldier nor a great leader. He was a mechanic. He worked in a workshop that was once used to repair colony machines, but now it was only his shelter. Inside the workshop, he fixed broken engines, cleaned old filters, and built tools from scraps. His hands were always dark with grease. He had survived many storms because he knew how to build shields and traps against acid rain. Tomas was inside, working with a rusted generator when he first heard the sound. At first, he thought it was only the storm tearing through metal beams. But the sound came again, sharper and weaker this time, almost like a call. He froze and listened. Years in the ruins had made him careful. Sounds often meant danger. But this sound carried something different. It carried pain. He wiped sweat and grease from his forehead, took a torch, and walked to the doorway. Outside, the acid rain fell in thick streams. He saw smoke rising where drops touched the ground. He almost closed the door, for only fools stepped into such weather. Then through the mist, he saw a small shape moving. Thomas narrowed his eyes. He thought maybe it was a wounded bird, or a broken drone trying to walk. But when lightning cut across the sky, he saw the truth. It was a dragon hatchling. He had heard stories of dragons, though he had never seen one alive. Colonists once spoke of the great winged beings that lived far in the mountains before the war. They said dragons were old as stone and wise as stars. But what stood before him now was not mighty or proud. It was small, weak, and suffering. Thomas felt his chest tighten. The creature stumbled, trying to move away from the storm, but it was too slow. Another strike of rain hit its wing, and steam rose with a hiss. The hatchling cried out again, the sound almost like a plea. Thomas could have closed the door. He could have said this was not his problem. He could have told himself that one man could not save a dragon. But he did not. His body moved before his mind could stop him. He grabbed a thick sheet of metal he had once used as a shield and ran into the storm. The rain hit the shield with a harsh sound, and drops splashed around his boots. The air smelled sharp and bitter, but he kept moving. He reached the hatchling and dropped the shield over it like a roof. The creature flinched, but when it saw Tomas kneeling, it stopped crying and only shivered. "Easy," Tomas said softly, though he knew the creature would not understand his words. "I will get you out." With both arms, he lifted the hatchling. It was heavier than he thought, but still light enough for him to carry. Its scales were hot where the acid had touched. He felt the tremble of its small heart under his grip. He held the shield above them with one hand and hurried back to the workshop. Inside, he laid the hatchling on a thick cloth spread across the floor. The creature curled up, still shivering. Smoke rose from the burns on its wings and back. Thomas quickly shut the door and threw down the heavy lock. Outside, the storm roared, but here they were safe for now. He rushed to the water filters he had built. They cleaned rainwater through layers of stone and sand, leaving only weak drops that humans could drink. He filled a bowl with the clean water and poured it gently over the hatchling's scales. Steam hissed, but the burns slowly cooled. The creature gave a soft cry, but then relaxed. Thomas kept washing the acid away, moving with care so he did not hurt it more. He tore clean strips of cloth and pressed them on the worst wounds. His hands were rough and dirty from grease, but they worked with steady care. The hatchling's eyes opened and fixed on him. They were large, golden, and full of light even in the dark workshop. For a moment, Tomas felt those eyes watching deep into him, as if trying to understand why he was helping. He gave a small smile. "You are safe now," he whispered. The dragon blinked slowly, and Thomas felt it understood his tone, if not his words. Time passed, and the storm outside grew louder. The workshop shook with the weight of the rain, but inside a strange calm filled the space. Thomas fed the hatchling with small pieces of dried meat he had saved. At first the creature refused, too weak to move. Then, after smelling the food, it opened its mouth and ate slowly. Each bite seemed to give it more strength. When it finished, it laid its head on the cloth and closed its eyes. Its breathing grew steady, no longer filled with pain. Thomas sat nearby, his back against an old machine. His hands were covered in grease, his arms tired, but his heart was warm. He looked at the sleeping hatchling and thought of the past. He remembered when the colony was full of people. Families walked these streets. Children played near the towers. The sound of machines was mixed with laughter. But war had come. The enemy had destroyed everything. Now only ruins remained, and he was alone. He had told himself he would stay alive only by fixing what he could. Nothing more. Yet tonight things were different. Something fragile and young had appeared in the storm, and he had chosen to protect it. He wondered why. Was it because he could not watch another life fade away? Or was it because, deep inside, he missed the feeling of care, the duty to guard something precious? He did not know. But he did know this. The hatchling had trusted him. That trust was heavy, like a tool placed in his hands. He could not throw it away. Outside, the acid rain fell without mercy. Inside, in the small light of a workshop lamp, a man and a hatchling rested. One had grease on his fingers. The other had burns on its scales. Both had scars of survival, and both had found, at least for this night, a reason to fight against the storm together. The storm outside did not end quickly. Acid rain often lasted for long hours and sometimes for days. The ruined colony world had grown used to such weather. The land was poisoned. The rivers were green with chemicals, and the air often burned the lungs. For Thomas, this was normal life. He had survived in this world for years, moving between shelters, fixing machines for food, and hiding from the ships that sometimes passed above. He had learned to be patient, to wait through storms like a hunter waiting for silence. But now, with the hatchling inside his workshop, the storm felt different. The noise of rain striking the metal roof seemed sharper, heavier, as if the whole world outside wanted to reach in and take what he had saved. He looked at the small creature curled on the cloth. Its breathing was slow but steady. Its scales still showed scars where the acid had burned, but it was alive. Thomas leaned closer. He had washed the burns with clean water and covered them with strips of cloth. The cloth had turned dark from poison, yet it stopped the pain for now. The hatchling's chest rose and fell with a rhythm like the beat of a quiet drum. Its wings twitched once, then rested. Thomas was not sure what to do next. He had never cared for a dragon. He had seen broken machines, sick animals, even wounded people in the war, but never something like this. He touched his chin, leaving a black streak of grease. "You are tougher than you look," he said softly. "Most would have died in that rain." The hatchling opened its eyes a little, golden and glowing, and made a low sound from its throat. Thomas felt strange when he heard it. It was not a word, yet it carried meaning. The sound was tired, but it was not empty. It was almost as if the creature wanted him to know it understood. He reached into his small storage box. Inside, he kept food that lasted long in ruins: dried meat, hard bread, and a few cans from the old colony. He took a strip of dried meat and placed it near the hatchling's mouth. At first, the creature did not move. Then, with slow effort, it opened its mouth and took a small bite. It chewed weakly, but swallowed. Thomas smiled. "Good, you need strength. You eat, and I will keep you safe." The hatchling ate more, though only little pieces. When it finished, it lowered its head again, but its eyes stayed open, watching Thomas with steady light. The man sat back, rubbing his hands on a rag. The grease never fully left his skin. He thought about how strange this moment was. He, a lonely mechanic, sitting in a workshop full of broken engines, sharing food with a dragon hatchling. Once, long ago, colonists spoke of humans and dragons as enemies. Dragons were wild, powerful, and dangerous. People feared them because they could burn fields and tear through machines. But here was a dragon too small to defend itself, looking at him with trust. Thomas felt a sense of duty rise in him. He did not ask for it, but it was there now. He decided to give the creature a name. Names carried weight, and in ruins they gave meaning to survival. He thought for a moment. The hatchling's scales were gray and black where the acid had burned. Its wings looked like ashes left after fire. "I will call you Ash," he said. The hatchling blinked, then gave a soft sound. It was almost as if it accepted the name. Thomas nodded. Then it is settled. Ash it is. The storm raged for hours, and Thomas used that time to work. He could not sit idle. He fixed an air filter that had been broken for weeks, cleaned the tools he used to repair engines, and checked the furnace that kept the workshop warm. Every few minutes he looked back at Ash to make sure it was still breathing calmly. At one point he found the hatchling trying to stand. It wobbled on its claws, spread its small wings, then fell back with a tired sound. Thomas hurried to its side. "Not yet," he said, lifting it gently and setting it back on the cloth. "You need rest. You will fly one day, but not tonight." Ash looked at him with a stubborn light in its eyes. Thomas laughed, a sound he had not heard from himself in a long time. "You have spirit. That is good. Spirit keeps you alive." Night came, though the storm kept the sky dark. Thomas lit a lamp made from old wires and a small power cell. The yellow glow filled the workshop. He sat near Ash, eating his own meal of bread and water. He offered the hatchling another piece of meat, which it accepted more easily this time. After the meal, Thomas began to speak. He knew the dragon could not understand all his words, but the silence was heavy, and his voice gave shape to the night. "I used to fix engines for the colony ships," he said. "Big machines strong enough to fly between worlds. But then the war came. They destroyed everything. Most people left or died. I stayed. Someone had to stay. Maybe I was foolish. Maybe I was stubborn. But here I am." Ash tilted its head as if listening. "You probably lost your family too," Thomas continued. "I do not know how you ended up in the rain. Maybe your nest was broken. Maybe you got lost. But it does not matter now. You are here, and I will not let the storm take you." For a long time, Thomas sat and told small stories about the days when the colony was alive, about the time he fixed a mining drill with only a hammer and rope, about how he once escaped a patrol by hiding inside a machine casing. Ash listened, eyes half closed, breathing steady. When Thomas finished, the storm outside had begun to fade. The heavy sound of rain grew weaker. The thunder rolled away and the air turned still. For the first time in many hours, silence filled the ruins. Thomas stood and walked to the doorway. He opened it a little, just enough to look out. The street was covered in smoke where the acid had struck. Metal beams were bent, stone was cracked, and pools of poison lay in holes. But above, the sky had cleared. Stars shone faintly between the clouds. He closed the door and turned back. Ash was watching him with bright golden eyes. Thomas felt a quiet warmth inside. "You are safe now, Ash," he said. "Tomorrow we will see what comes. For now, rest." The hatchling lowered its head and closed its eyes. Thomas sat nearby, his back against the wall, hands still stained with grease. He let his own eyes close, though his mind stayed sharp. For the first time in years, he did not feel completely alone. He had something to protect, and that gave him strength. In the ruins of a dead colony where storms burned and silence ruled, a bond had begun to form. A human mechanic and a dragon hatchling had found each other. Neither knew what the future held, but both knew one thing. Together, they had a chance. The sun rose weak over the ruined colony world. Light touched the broken towers and empty streets, but the ruins did not shine. Everything was gray, covered in ash and rust. Pools of acid water still steamed where last night's storm had left its mark. Inside the workshop, Thomas woke early. He always rose with the first light. Life in ruins taught him never to waste hours. Danger could come at any time, and only those who stayed ready survived. He sat up slowly, rubbing his eyes with grease-stained fingers. Ash, the hatchling, was curled on the cloth near the furnace. Its golden eyes opened when it felt Thomas move. The young dragon stretched its wings and gave a soft cry, no longer weak but still small. "Morning, Ash," Thomas said. His voice was rough but calm. "You look stronger today." The hatchling tilted its head, then made a short sound that almost felt like agreement. Thomas smiled. He went to his tools, checked the air filters, and made sure the workshop door was locked tight. After that, he gave Ash a piece of dried meat. The hatchling ate quickly this time, hungry after rest. Its energy was returning, and Thomas felt relief. But peace never lasted long in ruins. Thomas was repairing an old engine when he felt a rumble under his feet. At first, he thought it was thunder again, but the sky outside was clear. The rumble grew louder, steady like the beat of machines. He froze, listening. He knew that sound. Ships. Enemy ships. Thomas's chest tightened. He walked to the small window and looked up. Across the sky, black shapes moved between the clouds. They were patrol craft of the conquerors. the same ones who had burned the colony years ago. Their engines roared like iron beasts. Ash gave a sharp cry, sensing the danger. Thomas quickly closed the window and turned off the furnace light. The workshop fell into shadow. Quiet now, Thomas whispered.
Do not make a sound! The hatchling crouched low, its eyes glowing faintly in the dark.
Thomas hurried to the back of the workshop. There he pulled open a large machine casing. It was an old mining engine, rusted and broken, but its inside was big enough for Ash to hide. Inside, Thomas said, guiding the hatchling. Ash resisted for a moment, wings twitching. But Thomas touched its head gently and whispered, "Please," only for a little while. "You must stay safe." Reluctantly, Ash crawled inside the casing. Thomas covered the opening with spare metal plates and scattered tools on top to make it look like nothing more than junk. He wiped his hands and returned to the front of the workshop. Just as the sound of engines grew louder, shadows passed across the roof. Then, with a heavy noise, ships landed in the ruins nearby. Thomas's heart beat hard in his chest. He grabbed a wrench and forced himself to look calm. He had played this role before, an old mechanic, harmless, forgotten, not worth notice. But this time it was different. Now he had something to protect. Boots struck the ground outside. The sound of soldiers echoed between broken walls. Thomas heard voices speaking in the harsh tongue of the conquerors. They were searching. Moments later, the door of the workshop burst open. 3 soldiers stepped inside. Their armor was black and sharp, their masks hiding their faces. Each held a weapon that hummed with deadly power. One soldier pointed at Thomas. "Human," he said in broken words of the common tongue. "You live here?" Thomas nodded slowly. "I live here. I fix machines. Nothing more." The soldier looked around, his gaze sharp. "We search ruins. We seek living creatures. You see any?" Thomas forced his face to stay blank. "Only rats. No one else." The soldier walked closer. He looked at Thomas's hands stained with grease, then at the broken engine scattered across the floor. He sniffed the air as if trying to sense lies. Thomas kept his voice steady. "I fix what I can. It keeps me alive. I do not trouble you." The soldiers moved through the workshop, kicking tools aside, peering into corners. One of them came close to the mining engine where Ash was hidden. Thomas's throat went dry. His hand tightened on the wrench. If they opened the casing, if they saw the hatchling, everything would end. The soldier lifted a piece of metal from the top, looked inside, then dropped it back with a grunt. He turned away, uninterested. Thomas silently released a breath. After a long search, the leader stepped forward again. "If you see dragon," he said, his voice harsh, "you tell us. You do not hide. Understand?" Thomas nodded. "I understand." The soldiers gave him one last look, then left the workshop. Outside, their boots crunched over the broken street. A moment later, engines roared as their ships lifted into the sky. Thomas waited until the sound faded completely. Only then did he move to the mining engine. He pulled away the metal plates and opened the casing. Ash crawled out quickly, eyes wide, wings half spread. It gave a sharp hiss, not at Thomas, but at the memory of the danger. "It is over," Thomas said softly, kneeling. "They are gone for now." The hatchling pressed against his arm, its body trembling. Thomas placed a hand on its back, feeling the heat of its scales. "They will come again," he whispered. "They will not stop. They want your kind gone, but I will not let them take you. Not while I breathe." That night, Thomas could not sleep. He sat by the furnace, staring into the low flames. His thoughts were heavy. The conquerors had returned to the ruins. They were hunting dragons. If they found Ash, they would kill it without mercy. He looked at the hatchling sleeping beside him. Its chest rose and fell, steady and calm, unaware of the storm of danger waiting outside. Thomas felt a weight inside his chest. He had promised to protect it, but promises were not enough. He needed a plan. He could not hide forever. The soldiers would search again, and next time they might look closer. If they found the hatchling, both of them would die. Thomas thought of escape. The colony still had broken ships lying in the ruins. Engines were scattered across the land. If he could gather enough parts, he might build a craft strong enough to fly. It would not be easy. It would take skill, time, and more than a little luck, but it was the only chance. He rubbed grease between his fingers, thinking. His life until now had been about fixing what was broken. Engines, filters, furnaces, he always found a way to make them work again. Perhaps he could fix a future too. Not just for himself, but for Ash. He looked at the hatchling again. Its golden eyes opened for a brief moment, then closed, trusting him fully. Thomas felt that trust like a heavy tool placed in his hands. He could not drop it. "Tomorrow," he said to himself, his voice low and firm. "Tomorrow we begin." And so, in the silence of a ruined colony, with danger still close in the sky, a decision was made. A human mechanic and a dragon hatchling would not wait to be hunted. They would build a way out. The ruins were silent after the enemy patrol left, but Thomas knew the silence was not safety. The conquerors would return. They always returned. Their ships circled the skies, watching for any movement, hunting for survivors and especially for dragons. Thomas sat by the furnace, his mind full of heavy thoughts. The hatchling, Ash, slept close to him, its golden eyes half open even in rest. Thomas rubbed grease from his hands onto a rag. He had lived in ruins long enough to know one truth: hiding never lasted. If he stayed in the workshop, sooner or later the soldiers would come back. They would search more carefully, and when they found Ash, there would be no mercy. He looked at the young dragon and felt a sharp weight in his chest. He had promised to keep it safe. That promise meant more than any machine he had ever fixed, so Thomas made a decision. He would not wait for death to come knocking on the workshop door. He would build a way out. The next morning, Thomas woke before sunrise. The sky was still dark, but the stars shone faintly through thin clouds. He packed a small bag with tools: wrenches, cutters, wires, and a welding torch. He also filled 2 canteens with filtered water. "Ash," he whispered. The hatchling stirred and stretched its wings. Its scales were healing, though scars still showed from the acid rain. It tilted its head at him. "We are going out," Thomas said. "We need parts. Big parts. You stay close." Ash gave a short cry that sounded almost like agreement. Thomas opened the workshop door. The air outside carried a sharp chemical smell. The ruins stretched in all directions. Towers broken, streets cracked, pools of acid glowing faintly. He stepped out carefully, Ash following behind. Their destination was a ship graveyard 2 miles away. After the war, broken colony ships had crashed there. Thomas had scavenged from that place before, but never too deeply. It was dangerous. Sharp metal, unstable ground, and sometimes enemy patrols made it risky. But now he had no choice. The journey was slow. Thomas kept his eyes on the sky, ready to hide if shadows passed above. Ash walked close to his side, wings tucked in. At one point, the hatchling stopped and looked ahead, making a warning sound. Thomas froze. Out of the mist, a metal shape crawled across the ground. It was an old war drone, half broken, sparks flashing from its joints. Its sensor lights glowed red as it scanned the ruins. Thomas pulled Ash behind a wall and stayed still. The drone dragged itself past, slow and clumsy, but its weapon arm still worked. Thomas did not breathe until it disappeared into the distance. Only then did he move again. "You have sharp eyes," he whispered to Ash. "Good work." The hatchling gave a quiet growl, proud of itself. By noon, they reached the graveyard. The site was heavy. Great colony ships lay broken across the land, their wings snapped, engines torn. Some were half buried in the ground, others tilted at strange angles. Thomas stopped and studied the field. "This is it," he said. "Our future lies in these bones." He led Ash toward the nearest wreck. It was a transport ship, its hull black with burns. Thomas climbed inside through a torn section. Dust and ash filled the air. He moved carefully, testing each step on the tilted floor. He found the engine chamber and smiled faintly. One of the thrusters was cracked but still whole enough to fix. He touched the cold metal and felt hope stir. "This will do," he said. "With this we can fly." It took all his strength to loosen the bolts and wires. Ash watched him, then stepped forward and opened its mouth. A small flame burst out, melting the stubborn metal that held the thruster in place. Thomas laughed softly. "You are a better torch than the one I carry. Keep at it." Together, man and hatchling freed the thruster. Thomas marked other useful parts: fuel cells, wiring, and plates strong enough to rebuild a hull. They carried what they could back to the workshop, moving slowly through the ruins. Thomas's back ached under the weight, but he pushed on. Each step felt like progress, a move away from death and toward freedom. For many days, Thomas and Ash worked. The workshop filled with noise and sparks. Thomas shaped metal with his tools while Ash used fire to weld plates together. The hatchling's flame was steady, and Thomas guided it like a teacher guiding a student. At first, Ash burned too hot and melted holes through the plates. Thomas shook his head. "Not so strong. Gentle, Ash, like this." He showed the hatchling how to let the flame out in a thin stream. Ash tried again. This time the weld held. Thomas smiled and patted its head. Perfect. You are learning fast. The bond between them grew deeper with each day. Thomas spoke often, explaining what he was doing. This part here, it keeps the ship stable. Without it, we spin like a stone. And this wire, it carries power to the engines. If it breaks, the ship dies. We must make every part strong. Ash listened, head tilted, eyes bright. Though it could not understand every word, it understood the meaning. Work together. Survive together. At night, Thomas grew tired, but Ash stayed close, curling beside him to share warmth. Thomas often woke to the sound of ships far above. The conquerors patrolled, their lights sweeping the ruins like watchful eyes. Each time he froze, hand on his tools ready to hide, but they never came close enough to see. Still, the threat was always there. The faster he built, the better chance they had. One evening, after hours of welding, Thomas sat back and wiped sweat from his face. His hands were black with grease, his shirt torn, but his eyes shone with determination. Before him stood the frame of a small ship. It was not beautiful. It was rough, patched from different parts, scars of welding marks all across its hull, but it was real. Ash stepped closer, sniffing the metal, then gave a loud cry. Thomas laughed. Yes, Ash, it is ours. Not finished yet, but soon. This will carry us away from here. Work continued, but danger grew. One day, as Thomas scavenged wires from a broken machine, Ash gave a warning growl. Thomas looked up and froze. In the sky, a patrol ship was circling low. Its searchlights swept the ruins. He dragged Ash into the shadows of a broken wall. The ship hovered for a long time, scanning the ground. Thomas whispered, "Stay quiet. Do not move." The light passed close, so close that it touched the edge of the workshop roof. Ash pressed against Thomas, trembling with silent fury. Thomas held it close until the ship finally turned away and vanished into the clouds. After it was gone, Thomas let out a breath. They are getting closer. We must finish soon. Ash gave a sharp nod of its head, as if it understood. Days turned into weeks. The ship took shape under their hands. Thomas built controls, seating, and fuel storage. Ash tested its wings, growing stronger each day. Sometimes it flew short distances inside the workshop, knocking tools over with gusts of air. Thomas scolded it with a smile. Not inside, Ash. Save that for the sky. Finally, one night the ship stood ready. It was small but strong, thrusters glowing faintly as Thomas tested the power. The furnace flickered, casting long shadows across the metal hull. Thomas sat on the floor exhausted. His hands ached, his body was tired, but his heart was steady. He looked at Ash, who was watching the ship with wide golden eyes. "We did it," he said softly. "It is ready. Tomorrow we leave this place. No more hiding, no more waiting for them to find us." Ash spread its wings and gave a cry that shook the workshop walls. It was not a cry of pain or fear. It was a cry of hope. Thomas closed his eyes, listening. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to dream of freedom. The workshop was quiet except for the low hum of the ship's engine. Thomas sat on a metal crate, staring at the machine he and Ash had built with their hands, their fire, and their will to survive. It stood ready, patched together from broken parts but strong enough to carry them beyond the ruins. Ash rested near the hull, its wings stretched wide as if it already dreamed of flying in open skies. Its golden eyes glowed in the firelight. Thomas felt both pride and fear. Pride because they had achieved something impossible, fear because tomorrow they would test that achievement against the enemy who ruled the skies. He whispered to himself, "We leave at dawn." The morning came with a pale red glow over the ruins. The air was heavy with smoke drifting from far-off fires. Thomas rose early, checking every part of the ship one last time. He tightened bolts, tested wires, and tapped the thrusters. He had learned long ago that machines failed if treated with carelessness. Ash followed him closely, watching every movement. When Thomas reached the controls, the hatchling tilted its head as if memorizing the process. "You want to fly it, don't you?" Thomas said with a small smile. "Maybe one day. But today you sit with me." Ash gave a sharp cry that sounded almost like a laugh. Thomas finished his inspection. He stepped back and studied the ship. It was not beautiful like the sleek conqueror vessels. It was rough, covered with marks of struggle, but to him it was perfect. It was freedom. They loaded the last supplies, water, dry rations, and a few tools. Thomas packed maps he had drawn of the sky and the stars. He had studied the night for months, searching for paths where patrols were weakest. He knew their best chance was to rise fast, climb above the clouds, and escape the scanners. As he strapped himself into the seat, Ash climbed beside him, wings folded, tail curling around the floor. The hatch closed and the small space filled with the smell of metal and oil. Thomas placed his hand on the main lever. "This is it," he said. "Hold on," he pushed the lever. The engines roared. The ship trembled, dust falling from the ceiling. Ash pressed against him but did not flinch. The ground shook as the thrusters fired. Slowly the patched ship lifted from the floor. Thomas gritted his teeth, eyes fixed on the controls. The ship rose higher, past the ruined walls, past the broken towers. For the first time since the war began, Thomas felt the air beneath him instead of over him. But freedom was never easy. As the ship cleared the ruins, sirens echoed across the sky. Bright lights cut through the clouds. Patrol ships had noticed. Their sensors picked up the rising craft. Thomas's heart raced. "They see us," he muttered. Ash growled, pressing against the window. The nearest patrol ship turned sharply, engines blazing, heading straight toward them. It was larger, faster, built for war. Thomas's small craft could not win in a fight. He pulled the lever hard, making the ship climb at a steep angle. The hull groaned but held together. The patrol fired beams of energy. Blue streaks cut across the sky. One shot grazed the wing of Thomas's ship, leaving a black scar. The vessel shook violently. Thomas fought to steady it, sweat pouring down his face. "Hold, just hold," he whispered. Ash roared, flames bursting from its mouth. The fire struck the enemy beam for a moment before fading in the wind. But the roar itself filled the air with defiance, a sound the conquerors had tried to erase from the world. Thomas pulled every ounce of power from the thrusters. The ship surged upward, engines screaming. The patrol followed, firing again and again. Explosions lit the sky, shaking the earth far below. Finally, the clouds wrapped around them. Thick mist hid them from view, though the enemy still scanned the area. Thomas shut down the main thrusters and switched to smaller side engines, letting the ship drift quietly through the fog. They floated in silence, breath heavy. Ash pressed its head against Thomas's shoulder. "We're not safe yet," he said. "But we're close." The clouds broke and they entered the upper sky. Stars spread across the darkness, shining bright and clear. Thomas had not seen them this close in years. His chest tightened with wonder. "This is where we belong," he whispered. But danger still followed. More patrols rose from below, dark shapes moving between the stars. The conquerors did not let prey escape so easily. Thomas studied his maps. "We go east," he decided, toward the old satellites. "Their signals may blind the scanners." He pushed the ship forward. The hull rattled, but it moved. Ash crouched beside him, golden eyes fixed ahead. For hours they flew through the silent sky, chased by shadows. Thomas guided the ship carefully, avoiding direct lines of light. He used broken satellites and clouds as cover. His hands shook on the controls, but his mind stayed sharp. Every moment felt like a battle. At last, the old satellite field came into view. Dozens of broken machines floated in orbit, drifting slowly. Some still glowed faintly with power. Thomas steered toward them. "This is our chance," he said. They entered the field. Debris floated everywhere, a graveyard of human creation. Thomas guided the ship between twisted panels and shattered engines. The patrols followed, but their scanners flickered as the old signals interfered. Thomas smiled grimly. "It works," but then one patrol fired again. The beam struck a satellite, exploding it into a storm of fragments. Shards of metal cut across space, tearing at Thomas's ship. One shard pierced the side, alarms blaring. Ash roared, wings flaring in fury. Thomas gripped the controls. "Not now. Hold together." The ship shook but did not break. Smoke filled the cabin, but Thomas kept flying. He knew one truth. If he stopped, they were finished. Finally, the patrols began to fall back. The interference grew stronger near the heart of the satellite field. Their scanners could not see clearly. They circled, firing blindly, but Thomas's ship slipped deeper into the graveyard, hidden by broken machines. Thomas let out a breath he did not know he had been holding. His arms ached, his eyes burned, but he kept steady. Ash pressed against him, its golden eyes shining with relief. "We made it this far," Thomas said, "but we must go farther still." Beyond the field lay open stars. Thomas studied his maps again. There was a colony signal, faint but real, in the distance. a place where survivors had gathered, far from the conqueror's reach. If they reached it, Ash would be safe. Humanity would not be alone. He turned the ship toward that signal. Engines hummed weakly but still carried them forward. The journey was long. Hours turned to days. Supplies ran low, but Thomas shared everything with Ash. He drank less so the hatchling could have more water. He ate only half of each ration, saving the rest for his companion. "You are the future," he told Ash one night, his voice weak but steady. "You must live even if I do not." Ash growled and pressed its head against him, refusing the idea of leaving him behind. At last, on the third day, light appeared ahead. A station floated among the stars, patched together from old ships but alive. Human signals pulsed from it, strong and clear. Thomas's chest filled with joy. "We found them," he whispered. "We are not alone." The station opened its gates as the ship approached. Lights guided them in. When the craft finally touched down inside the hangar, Thomas collapsed against the seat. Tears in his eyes, Ash roared with triumph, wings wide, flame lighting the walls. Men and women ran forward, their faces filled with shock and wonder. One of them pointed at Ash. "A dragon," they said. "A real dragon," another added, "and a man with it, together." Thomas stepped out slowly, leaning on the hatch. He was exhausted, but his voice was strong. "We survived," he said. "We built this ship from ruins. We escaped their patrols. Humanity is not finished, and this dragon lives with us. It is proof that we can rise again." Ash stood beside him, tall and proud, golden eyes shining like fire. The survivors cheered. For the first time in many years, hope filled the air. That night, as Thomas rested in the station, he looked out through the window at the stars. Ash curled beside him, asleep but safe. He thought of the ruins, the long struggle, the fire they had shared. He whispered, "This is not the end. This is the beginning." And deep in his heart, he knew it was true. Humanity and dragons would rise together, stronger than ever before. The sky was no longer a prison. It was their future.